What's good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one I want to break down what's going on with Tesla, SPY, Nvidia, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I want to break down what's happening with the data coming out for tomorrow, what data also came out today that caused the market to move the way it did, what's happening with some earnings, and also with the options chain for SPY, as we have loads of options expiring for tomorrow, which could cause some high volatility. But before I break down all this information, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things. I am firstly not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo with the link down below and deposit $100 into the account, you are guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $1,000, you're guaranteed up to 15 free stocks, and the offer ends very, very soon. Anyways, when it comes to the way the SPY and these other charts out there ended up moving, it was heavily dependent on a lot of data. So I wanted to break down how this ended up happening before I break down my predictions for later. So what happened was SPY was pumping during the pre-market. It hit a new all-time high at 518.3. But in reality, this was just Wall Street getting ready for a big move before PPI. They pumped it up because they knew PPI was going to be hot, in my opinion, and then that's the reason why they started shorting up here. Wall Street was shorting, they started selling up here, then the data came out and the market tanked. That's what I think basically happened. All right, so why did the market end up sinking? Here's the reason why they used. PPI came out, and this was not the best. PPI month over month was 0.6%. It should have been at 0.3%. This was hotter than expected. Core PPI month over month was 0.3%. This was aligned with expectations. Core PPI year over year was at 2%, aligned with expectations. And then PPI year over year was 1.6%, a little bit hotter than expected, not the best of data. So why is this important? Producer price index is basically a leading indicator for CPI, showing us that some wholesale prices are starting to go up. This means there's a risk of CPI and inflation still going up in the US, so you have to be very careful. Now, this incentivizes the Fed to kind of like be very careful with their policies. They may have to keep rates up higher for longer, and they may have to reduce the amount of times they cut this year. Not a guarantee, but it's a possibility. And we'll be listening to what Jerome Powell has to say next week. Now, that's why the market ended up selling off, because of the risk of this, because it kind of affects the Fed's policies, not to mention the fact that inflation could be showing signs of coming back up again. Now, despite that, tomorrow is going to be Friday, March 15th, and you have to remember that we have some data coming out. So we have some industrial data in the morning, which is very, very minor, not going to really affect us that much. The main thing affecting us is going to be at 10 o'clock a.m. I think this is the main thing you should pay attention to. 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 30 minutes after the market opens, we have the Michigan Consumer Sentiment Report, the 5-year inflationary expectations, and also the current conditions report alongside more inflationary expectations for the month of March. This is going to be very important, so let's see what this causes for the markets. So I'm expecting some high volatility at 10 a.m. Additionally, when it comes to the earnings that came out, I went over most of these in the morning. We also had Adobe that came out, and they actually ended up seeing a sell-off. That's despite the fact that things look like this. So earnings per share was $4.48 above expectations, and revenue was about $5.18 billion, not $5, $5.18 billion above expectations. So everything was aligned with expectations, if not better. Revenue also grew quite a bit, but the issue is the net income decreased about $620 million. And on top of this, for their fiscal second quarter earnings, basically we're seeing an earnings per share of $4.35 to $4.40. That is once again okay overall. Not the best, it's just aligned with expectations, but the revenue expectation of 5.25 billion to 5.3 billion is a little bit lower than what the expectation is. So because we saw net income drop a bit and their overall sales are not forecast to be as strong, that's not the best of news for them. So not the strongest of guidances, and that's why Adobe is down quite a bit. Now, for SPY, I want to call out something very, very important. We have a massive, insane options chain for tomorrow. Okay, we have about close to 1.3 million, maybe a little bit more than that, of the calls expiring, 1.3 million calls, and then we have over 4 million puts expiring with the 3.1 puts to call ratio. Max pain is at 490, so that's the most advantageous close to cause as much pain as possible. But sometimes the market makers don't really follow max pain. Sometimes they like to just squeeze shorts as much as possible, especially if people start shorting the market very hard. So this puts a big risk for tomorrow that the market's going to be very volatile and we're going to be looking for some very, very big moves. Currently, the fear and greed index is at greed right now. It's still up here. Will this come back to extreme, or will it end up failing? Other indicators are close to extremes. The VIX is also kind of neutral right now. It's still kind of stuck close to the 50 daily moving average, still kind of consolidating. So we'll see if anything changes. So what do I see on the chart? What do I think is going to happen for tomorrow? Honestly, guys, I don't have a high conviction prediction, but I can tell what I think might happen. This is going to depend on how we end up opening and what we end up doing. So right here, I noticed a little pattern here. Basically, when we get sell-offs on SPY, generally when we form wicks like this, see how it formed wicks right here last week, right? We end up getting a big push to the upside because they grab liquidity, then they push us back up within an hour, and that's typically when you get this big reaction. Right here, we kind of sold off of it. We got a little wick. We came up higher, then we came back down, and then we ended up, excuse me, we ended up forming a big wick right here at 508. This is where they grab liquidity again, and they push this thing up high. Then they formed more wicks here, pushed it up higher, and you could see how this is kind of playing out. Look at what happened yesterday. At the end of the day yesterday, we got this big drop on SPY. Remember, we got this big drop. Then they pushed it all the way back up to the new all-time high right before the market ended up opening. Okay? We ended up kind of opening on a decent place before this thing started selling off again. Today, it sold off from the wick, sold off from the wick, sold off from the wick before it tried to come back up, which makes us think maybe there's going to be a move to the upside coming. That is a little bit more probable, but just to be safe, we have to watch for confirmation. Why do I say that? Because today we were just range bound. SPY was just going back and forth all day. So we have to see a confirmation move above the 515s for this thing to really start pushing. And we'll have to see if that ends up being the case. So if you're bullish and you think there's going to be a short squeeze since we have all these shorts expiring hypothetically, all right, if you think it's going to happen, you need to see this thing break above this high right here, 515.6, and start pushing to 516.5. If we break that, we have an imbalance to fill at 517, and we also have the 518s coming as resistance. If you're bearish, if you think the market's going to sink, you're going to be watching 513.5. If we lose that, there's 512 coming. And if we end up losing the 512 area, there's a risk of this coming all the way back down to like 510, 509, low levels like that. So we'll lose 513.5 and a bigger drop could be coming. Then we could turn more bearish and these lower targets could come. Break the 515.6 area and this thing could start pushing to higher levels and the short squeeze is a possibility. What do I think is a little bit more likely? Honestly, guys, I'm open-minded. It's almost 50-50 for me, but I'm leaning a little bit more in favor of them trying to push us higher to squeeze shorts. This would be very, very unexpected for a lot of people after how much we dropped, and also because of all these puts expiring, market makers may have a game up their sleeve. But it is very difficult for me to predict this because it depends on what the market makers' intentions are, and they could even change them intraday depending on the options chain. So sometimes, a bunch of people could buy puts intraday because of the 0 day to expiration options. That's causing more volatility, and that could even lead to a massive intraday squeeze. So that's the reason why I'm a little indecisive. I'm not as confident about which way we're going to go, but I do favor somewhat more that this thing is going to try to push up higher, try to fill this imbalance up here, and I think that the market makers may play some games. But just to be safe, make sure you watch your levels to be prepared for anything. Watch the levels I called out as we have 515.6, 516.5, and eventually the 518 zone as resistance. I do favor this trying to bounce a little bit more. So just to be safe, make sure you watch. Now, unlike SPY, which had those nice wicks, the QQQ to me is still looking a little bit weak. It does have some wicks forming here, but we do have a bearish wedge, so this could lead to some downside. So if we're bearish, you want to see the QQQ lose 438. If you lose this, a bigger drop could be coming all the way down towards 436. Now, if we're bullish, we want to see this thing break above 440, start pushing back up to 442 plus. Now, we had a similar formation where we got this big wick down here before they launched us back up, and we formed a big wick here before it came back. So this makes me suspect that they may actually be using technicals as a trap, and the QQQ could maybe drop a bit, then try to pop back up or try to push back up to 440. I find that to be more probable that it starts to push back up into the 440s, but just to be safe, let's wait and see. Let's see what happens with all the data, what reaction we get when the Michigan data comes out, not to mention what happens with the options chain. For another ticker like Tesla, in my opinion, is not looking that great. So Tesla's been really underperforming, but I do see a possible falling wedge that's been developing on it, and we'll see if Tesla could try to get a bounce from here. If Tesla manages to hold above 162 tomorrow, we could see a rebound to at least 165, if not a little bit higher. If Tesla fails to hold 162, if we kind of like pop and then drop, again, it's going to be sinking to lower levels. The chart is technically bearish looking, but I want to see a counter trend move because it's been dropping too hard, too fast. But it's a little bit tricky to predict Tesla because so much bad news is coming out. I would love to see a little pop. I think it's going to pop in the open. I think it could be testing 165 so long as there's no major bad news. And then we'll see if we get a big rejection. Do we hit 165 and then reject hard and start sinking to 157? Or do we hold up very, very nicely? Look for a pop on Tesla and let's see how well it holds up. The reason why I have to be a little bit less like confident is because there's just so much news that comes out that's affecting Tesla. It's very news dependent. I do anticipate a little pop to come when we open, and we'll see if the pop lasts or if it ends up failing. But I do suspect there is a possibility that this falling wedge leads to a breakout. Tesla kind of like pushes to 165, comes back down, establishes a higher low, and tries to push a little higher. It's a real possibility. I really hope that ends up being the case. For Nvidia, oh, and by the way, if you want to be bearish on Tesla, you want to see it lose 162 and 160. If you lose this 157.5 is coming in 155. But I favor it's going to try to bounce a bit. So we'll see if that ends up being the case. For Nvidia is not looking that great. It's been falling and falling and falling. But I guess you could kind of draw it like a wedge here. Let me just try to do it to see how this could actually look. So if I were to take this drawing tool and draw it out like this, we can even draw it out in a more simple manner. Looking at the way this thing has been falling, Nvidia has been forming a potential falling wedge like right here. So this makes me suspect it could get a bounce, but we need to see confirmation just to be safe. So if we're bearish, you want to see Nvidia basically lose 862. If we lose this, a bigger drop is coming to 852. If we're bullish, you want to see it basically break out past 885. If this breaks, we're going to be pushing up into the 900s. With this falling wedge-like structure, this is technically a bullish pattern, so this could lead to us breaking out tomorrow. If Nvidia gets a big reaction, this could help the QQQ, but I have to see Nvidia get back above 885 for confirmation. I do lean a little bit in that direction, but I don't see any confirmation for break yet on the chart. We got to get that break. We have to get above 885 for this to turn back up. So let's watch for that for tomorrow. Otherwise, it still is downtrending. So let's see if we get that break tomorrow. It's a real possibility. For Aapl, now Aapl is showing some life. We have a possible cup and handle like formation. This is like our big cup right here. This could be like a handle, but in order for this to break out, we have to try to break out of this little pennant that's forming. So we have a pennant forming right here on Aapl like this. When this happens, we're getting very tight because high volatility is likely coming. So what this means is Aapl might form a cup and handle. If we break 174, that's going to be confirmation. 175 and 175.75 are coming. If we lose 172.5, a bigger drop could come as well to 170.9. My guts tells me with this cup and handle forming, this could attempt to hit 174 plus and start breaking out higher. I do favor that somewhat more on Aapl. I would like to see this thing break this high, this resistance up here, but this depends on if Aapl could truly get that confirmation, if Aapl could truly get that break. So I hope we could get it. I do think it's going to test 174. If we break it, we're going to start pushing higher. I'm hoping that happens, but just to be safe, let's watch tomorrow for confirmation. With that being said, that is it for the main five I typically go over. Let's go over just a couple of others just to be blunt. So on Rivian, on the 4-hour time frame, this came down all the way down to this 10.5 area, but now we're trying to bounce back up to 11. If we get a follow through move, we could make our way back up to about 11.5 if we get that bounce. I am seeing some signs that it's trying to make its way back up, but we have to break past resistance at 11 flat and 11.36. I'm seeing some life, some potential for this thing to try to push back up, but we need a follow through move. There is some life in it. For SoFi, this is trying to bounce a little bit. We have to get back above 7.14. If we break that, 7.25 is coming. And this thing could try to bounce towards this imbalance, but we need a follow-through move. We need confirmation just to be safe. Now, the 4-hour is looking kind of weak, but there is some potential in this. As long as we hold above 7, it could bounce. If we lose 7, we turn bearish. My gut tells me it's going to try. For ARM, we're very indecisive right now. We're just trading kind of sideways. We did see this liquidity grab before it came back down. I'd say the chart is still trading sideways. We have 130 as our support zone, 130.62. We have resistance at 132. We'll see which way it goes. It's still kind of flat right now. I did call this kind of dropping a little bit yesterday, and that did happen, but we're still indecisive. We haven't really made a big move yet, so we'll be watching just to be safe. For Super Micro, on the 4-hour time frame, let's check this out. This is not looking the best to me. You guys can see we got this little rejection here. So it looks to me like it might come a little bit lower towards 1,089 to 1,100. It may drop a little bit, and we'll see if we get a bounce from there or not. So it might drop a bit and then try to bounce off 1,089 to 1,100. So watch and see. But for now, there is a risk of this coming down a little lower before it tries to bounce. For Palantir, Palantir, in my opinion, looks kind of bearish. There's no sign of a bounce yet. If we lose this, we have this imbalance to fill up to about 24, then 23.5 is coming. So the chart still looks bearish. Unfortunately, we're not getting much of a bounce yet. For the IWM Russell 2000, it's very indecisive. We hit the 200 EMA. As long as we hold above 200, I could be looking for a little rebound towards 203. It's still kind of indecisive though on that end. 203 plus could be coming if we get the bounce. If we fail at 200, we're going to be dropping lower. But I do see potential for 203 plus tomorrow. For Microsoft, we're still holding up very nicely, breaking our highs. The chart looks bullish. This looks bullish. This might help the market tomorrow. We're going to likely retest 427, and our next target is going to be 430 above that. Microsoft is looking bullish to me. For AMD, I called some downside as a possibility. That's what we got. I think it might get close to 180 before it tries to bounce. Either 184 or 180 could be retested, but watch to see if we bounce off that because that's where our 200 EMA happens to be. For the VIX, now on the 4-hour time frame, the VIX kind of bounced as the market came down, but now the VIX is kind of rejecting. So if this rejection candlestick leads to a sell-off, again, we have to see the VIX lose 1411. If it loses that, this is going to be a big win for the bulls, for the overall market. If it bounces off 1411, will be good for the bears, for SPY, and the market. I also want to call out to the daily on the VIX. Even though the VIX tried to push higher, the daily is actually looking kind of bullish. It's looking so far. We just need a follow-through move for this thing to push higher. So the VIX is still all over the place, but there is a rejection on the 4-hour that does suggest that there's some hope for the bulls for the markets. For the dollar index, this is looking bullish, but we're approaching 103.5. Why? That's the 200 EMA. The last time we were around here, we kind of shuffled and rejected. So I think it might push a little bit. Maybe the market comes down a bit because of this. And then if it gets a rejection off this resistance and comes down, that will be bullish for the stock market. If it breaks through this would be bearish. It's approaching some tight resistance, so we'll see if it rejects or not. It still could reject. Coinbase came down. I was saying that yesterday, it was looking kind of bearish to me. Now we're trying to retest our 50 EMA. We're currently actually at it. So if we could break past 238s tomorrow, we could push back up to 240 plus and eventually 247. If we reject off 238-ish, very close to where this is, I could see this actually rejecting, coming back down. Let's hope it tries to break past 240, and if it does do so, it could push higher. So we need to get that bounce to try to hold this level. 227 was a key support. We bounced off of it so far. We'll see if this thing could try to hold up. So be careful. The technicals are still showing this thing going lower, but there is potential for an attempt to bounce. We'll see if we get that bounce or not. For Google, we're looking bullish. We got a breakout thanks to bullish news. We're approaching 145. This could push higher. And with this imbalance, I think 147 is a real possibility for Google. We look like we might be testing 147 to push higher. Amazon, the 4-hour is looking kind of decent overall. We are looking a little indecisive in the after hours, but I think that it might try to get very close to this 180 area. May come down a bit to 178 flat, so watch to see if we get a bounce or not. If we get the bounce, 180 is coming. If we lose it, we're going to sink, but I think it might still try to push higher as the chart is looking kind of bullish, and it's trying to invalidate the head and shoulders. We had this head and shoulders, but this could have been a trap for retail. Sometimes it happens. I said in order for us to see this head and shoulders play out, we have to lose 172. We never lost it. We actually came down just temporarily below it before coming back up, and now we're still uptrending. So Amazon's making a full recovery. Watch 180's resistance. We could push higher. On the 4-hour time frame on Meta is looking a little bit weak right now as we lost support at 494, but make sure you guys watch this support right here, basically very close to right here at 490. It's basically 488. If we lose this, our next target is going to be 484 to 485. So it could sink a little bit more, but watch and see if we get a bounce or not. So we'll see how that goes. With that being said, guys, I just want to thank you all so much for listening. As far as the market goes, with these liquidity grabs on SPY, there is a stronger likelihood that it's going to try to push back up, especially since we have so many of these puts expiring. But I'm not extremely confident in making that claim. I'm going to try to be open-minded because of the fact that SPY has a range, right? SPY has this range that we're going to be watching for. So just to be safe, we'll see how it goes. So honestly, guys, watch the range, see which way we end up breaking it, be prepared for the possibility of a push to the upside because of this liquidity sweep right here and because of some technicals and because of all the puts expiring. So be open-minded for that. And with that being said, I just want to thank you all so much for listening. Please have a great day, guys. Do what you have to do. I'll see you guys very soon tomorrow morning to discuss how the market's looking. All right. Have a great day. Thank you and peace out.